Did you know that perhaps the most repeated prayer in history is also one of the least understood? Millions of people pray the Lord's Prayer every day, but almost nobody realizes that Jesus was not simply teaching words to be memorized. He was teaching a structure capable of reorganizing the human mind, because the Lord's Prayer does not begin asking for money. It does not begin asking for miracles. It does not begin talking about enemies. Jesus begins with connection, presence, surrender, forgiveness, inner direction. This is not accidental. And maybe there's something even deeper here, because today, neuroscience has begun discovering something astonishing. When a person enters sincere states of prayer and contemplation, the brain literally changes the way it functions. Areas associated with fear reduce activity. It's as if the survival switch were finally turned off by an invisible hand. The nervous system slows down. Breathing reorganizes itself. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for clarity, awareness, and decision-making, becomes stronger. And for a few moments, the body stops acting like someone trying to survive the universe alone. Now think about this deeply. What if Jesus understood something about the human mind that science is only now beginning to reach? Because maybe the Lord's Prayer was never only spiritual, maybe it was also biological, psychological, emotional. Maybe Jesus was teaching exhausted human beings how to leave the state of inner war, because there are people who look normal on the outside, but internally live like someone trying to prevent an invisible collapse. People who smile, but keep their jaw clenched, who sleep, but wake up exhausted, who pray, but remain accelerated inside, who believe in God, but whose bodies still function as if they've been abandoned. And maybe that's why you're listening to this now, because some part of you feels that there is something inside the Lord's Prayer that was never truly explained. And maybe today, for the first time, you'll understand that Jesus was not only teaching a prayer, he was teaching a way out. Some time ago, I found a man sitting inside his car in a supermarket parking lot, engine off, eyes distant, both hands gripping the steering wheel like someone trying to stop his own mind from breaking apart. I knew that man, always strong, always functional, the kind of person who solves problems before others even notice they exist. But that day, he looked empty. After a few minutes in silence, he said something almost in a whisper. "I pray every day, but my mind never rests." And those words stayed echoing inside me. Because maybe that's the hidden sentence inside millions of people who love God, but live emotionally exhausted, people who believe, but whose bodies remain stuck in survival mode. Then he said something even deeper. "It's like my body never fully believes it's safe." Notice this. Maybe you're not tired only because you work too much. Maybe you're tired because your body never fully believes it can relax. As if your mind learned that if you stop for 1 second, everything falls apart. And science discovered something frightening about the human brain. It does not perfectly distinguish between a real threat and an imagined threat repeated many times. That's why constant fearful thoughts produce real muscular tension, real shallow breathing, real exhaustion. Your body reacts to thoughts as if they were physical events, and slowly, the brain learns to survive in hyper-alertness. That's why there are people who sleep with their jaw clenched, with pressure in the chest, with a racing heart, as if the nervous system spends the entire night waiting for an invisible tragedy. Maybe you know that feeling. The body is still, but the mind keeps running. And maybe this is exactly where Jesus enters in a revolutionary way. Because the Lord's Prayer is not merely a prayer to repeat, it is a gradual reconstruction of consciousness, a crossing from fear into trust, from control into surrender, from scarcity into presence, from separation into belonging. And that's why every sentence in this prayer seems simple, but carries depths most people never notice. Notice how Jesus begins. He could have taught, Lord of hosts, eternal King, creator of the universe. But no, Jesus chooses an intensely human word, Father, because frightened people do not first need power, they need safety. That changes everything, because the human brain reorganizes itself when it feels secure attachment. Researchers discovered that secure relational bonds reduce activity in the amygdala, the region associated with fear and hypervigilance. Now notice this spiritually. When you say, Our Father, something deep happens inside the mind. You stop existing as someone abandoned, trying to survive life alone. You reconnect, and maybe one of the greatest pains of modern humanity is not lack of information, but excess separation. Separation from God, from others, from yourself. That's why Jesus does not say, My Father. He says, Our Father, because isolated suffering sickens the human being, but belonging reorganizes identity. Maybe the true miracle begins exactly here. In the moment your nervous system finally understands that you are not alone in the universe. And maybe that's exactly why some people cry during sincere prayers. It's not only spiritual emotion, it's the body relaxing after years of trying to survive alone. There is an invisible law functioning inside the human mind. Whatever repeatedly receives your attention begins shaping your perception of reality. Neuroscience calls this selective focus. Your brain creates emotional priority based on what you continually feed. That's why people immersed in fear begin seeing threat everywhere. And people who cultivate reverence, gratitude, and contemplation slowly alter their own inner experience. Now, notice the genius of Jesus. Hallowed be thy name. Before asking for anything, Jesus teaches contemplation, reverence, inner alignment. Because whatever you deeply contemplate slowly begins reorganizing you. The Psalms spoke about this constantly. Be still and know that I am God. Notice how this sounds spiritual, but also physiological. Stillness is not only an act of the soul, it is an act of the nervous system. Breathing changes, heart rate changes, brain activity changes. And maybe the reason your mind feels so exhausted is not only excess problems, maybe it's excess stimuli competing for your attention all the time. News, comparisons, fears, urgencies. The human brain was not designed to live fragmented 24 hours a day, because a fragmented mind loses the ability to feel presence. And Jesus begins by reorganizing exactly this, the focus of consciousness. There is an exhaustion born from trying to control everything. Results, people, the future, time, image, destiny. You wake up already carrying the weight of the world on your back, trying to guarantee nothing goes wrong, trying to predict everything, control everything, solve everything before it happens. But the truth is, your hands are too small to hold tomorrow. And maybe the reason your mind never fully rests is because it believes that if you relax for 1 second, everything will collapse. Notice how heavy this is. Many people live like this, the body sitting on the couch, while the mind tries solving the next 5 years. And biologically, this destroys the organism. Cortisol rises, muscles remain tense, breathing shortens. The brain enters constant hyper-alertness. Then Jesus says, "Thy will be done." This is not resignation. It is intelligent surrender. It is the moment you release the weight before it breaks your emotional spine, because there is an enormous difference between giving up hope and giving up the obsession with control. Maybe that's why so many people live emotionally shattered. They believe in God, but continue trying to sustain the universe alone. And slowly, the body pays the price. Jesus understood something profound about the human mind. Human beings become sick when trying to carry a weight they were never created to bear. And maybe this is exactly where prayer stops being merely spiritual and begins becoming physiological, because the body also needs to learn how to surrender. Now notice something astonishing. Jesus does not teach, "Give us the bread for our entire life," nor the bread for the next 10 years. He says, "Our daily bread." Daily. This is almost a neuropsychological intervention, because the anxious mind constantly tries to inhabit futures that do not yet exist. And the human brain pays biologically for imagined threats repeated over and over. You shower while thinking about problems. Try to sleep while rehearsing tragedies. Talk to someone, but emotionally remain trapped in future scenarios, and slowly your entire life becomes anticipation. Jesus interrupts this cycle. He brings consciousness back to now, to today's bread, today's strength, today's air, because presence reorganizes the nervous system. Maybe that's why some people carry peace, even in difficult times. Not because their lives are perfect, but because their consciousness does not live permanently hijacked by tomorrow. And there is something even deeper here. The human brain finds stability when it learns to trust. That's what Jesus is teaching, training the mind to abandon constant scarcity and begin perceiving provision again. Because maybe life is not happening in the future you fear. Maybe it's happening now, and your body is begging you to return. There is a pain that does not disappear simply because you stopped talking about it. The body keeps remembering in tense shoulders, in shallow breathing, in unexplained fatigue, in a mind that never fully relaxes. You say you forgave, but why does your stomach still burn when you remember that person? Because forgiveness is not only an idea, it is a chemical release. Science discovered that prolonged emotions of guilt, resentment, and anger keep the brain in a constant inflammatory state, as if the organism remained trapped in defense mode. Now notice the depth of Jesus. He uses the word debts, because emotional guilt works exactly like that, like something unresolved inside the mind, silently consuming energy. And Jesus knew something profound. Unpaid emotional debts rot the container carrying them, you. And maybe there is something even stronger here. Many people cannot let go of pain because they built identity around it. Suffering became familiar, became emotional language, became a form of control. But forgiveness interrupts this cycle, not because the past disappears, but because the body finally receives permission to stop reliving the wound repeatedly. Maybe there is a part of you that has been asking for rest for years, and maybe God is not asking perfection from you right now. Maybe He is simply trying to free you from the invisible weight slowly making your soul sick. Maybe the greatest battlefield of modern life is not outside, but inside human attention. Because whatever dominates your attention slowly dominates your consciousness. Proverbs already said, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Today, neuroscience perceives something similar. Repeated thoughts strengthen repeated neural circuits. What you practice internally, the brain transforms into pattern. That's why Jesus ends the Lord's Prayer speaking about protection. Deliver us from evil, because there are mental patterns that slowly destroy human life. Constant fear, self-sabotage, guilt, compulsion, hypervigilance, despair. And maybe there is an even more uncomfortable realization here. Maybe many people are not only trapped in problems, maybe they are trapped in the identity built around them, as if suffering had become the only way the brain learned to feel control. But Jesus teaches another possibility, a consciousness not dominated by fear, a mind that does not need to remain at war to feel alive, because maybe the true spiritual battle happens first inside the mind. Now notice the complete architecture. Jesus begins with belonging, then reorganizes focus, then teaches surrender, then brings presence, then cleanses guilt, then strengthens inner vigilance. This is not a random prayer. It is a gradual reconstruction of human consciousness. Maybe the Lord's Prayer was never only a religious prayer. Maybe it was a path for rebuilding human beings fragmented by anxiety, long before the word anxiety existed. Because people in deep prayer frequently report something very specific: clarity. Not because all their problems disappeared, but because the inner noise diminished. The brain slowed down enough to perceive direction again. Maybe the most urgent miracle in your life is not external. Maybe it is inner silence. Maybe it is your body finally learning that it no longer needs to live in a state of war. Because a peaceful mind creates a different life. And maybe Jesus knew this long before neuroscience existed. So maybe today, you do not only need to repeat the Lord's Prayer, maybe you need to walk through it, slowly, breathing through every sentence, allowing each word to reach places inside you that have been tired for too long, because maybe the true miracle of this prayer is not making God hear you. Maybe it is finally making your body believe that you are not alone. The Psalms say, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone make me dwell in safety." Notice how this does not sound only spiritual. It sounds physiological, like someone whose nervous system finally left the state of war. So tonight, do not pray automatically. Pray like someone relearning safety, like someone allowing their own consciousness to come home again. And maybe, silently, the noise inside you will finally begin to fade. Because maybe the Lord's Prayer was never only a prayer meant to be spoken. Maybe it was always a path for exhausted human beings to rest again. Today you realize that your mind responds to what you repeat, and that the teachings of Jesus aren't just inspiration, they are direction for your consciousness. They shape maturity, they build discernment, they develop a stable mind, one that isn't dependent on circumstances. But transformation doesn't happen just because you understand something. It begins with a decision, and it's solidified through small actions, repeated every single day. A video can awaken you, but consistency is what rewires you. That's how the mind is reprogrammed. That's how emotional independence is formed. That's how you move out of internal scarcity and begin to live with clarity, stability, and abundance of awareness. And from that abundance comes a lighter life, more inwardly prosperous, less controlled by fear, more aligned with purpose. Now here's the turning point. If you leave this moment and change nothing, your mind will keep reinforcing yesterday's pathways. And yesterday's pathways produce yesterday's results. But if you begin today, even with one simple step, a new structure starts to form. What you do in the next 24 hours begins shaping the direction of the next few months. If you want to step out of the anxiety cycle, if you want to anchor your mind in truth daily and build a life that feels steady, light, and inwardly prosperous, I've organized a practical path to help you do exactly that. This isn't about more information. It's about training. It's about guided consistency. It's about intentionally rewiring your mind. If something in you resonated with this, don't ignore that pull. If you feel ready to go deeper, access is available through the link in the description. Not because you need to buy something, but because this might be the moment you choose to begin differently. It's a next step, but it could be the beginning of an entirely new internal foundation.